what it's like to work with a professional photographer. I'm going to stick to that pretty narrow topic. I will try to be brief because I'm really looking forward to the roundtable discussion. There's a lot of detail in these slides, and then I also made up a doc that Bo will share with you if anyone wants more information, more detailed stuff that you can refer to whenever. So yeah. So about me, I moved to Maine 10 years ago. I didn't really know what I was doing. I had always done photography as a hobby, and I had just saved up and bought my first sort of real camera. I worked as a produce buyer in a natural foods market and started going to the farmer's market, and that was my first foray into local food and sustainable growing. And then in 2012, I connected to Goranson Farm, which is a diversified organic vegetable farm in Midcoast, Maine, through a community art project as a photographer. And that totally changed my life. I ended up going to work for them full time for 4 years. I ended up as a farmhand. I did a lot of hand weeding. I did tractor cultivating. I did a lot of picking legumes and strawberries. I did farmers markets and totally fell in love with it. It was the first time in my life I felt normal. I love vegetable farming. I wanted to be a vegetable farmer, couldn't figure out how to make it work. So I kept pursuing photography as a way to kind of stay in line with what I loved about farming and also kind of fill gaps that I noticed in communication between what farmers do and what the public thinks or what the customers understand or what the customers value. For me, photography has been a means of communicating the amount of effort and the importance in local food. So yeah, I've been doing that. I did that for a while and then I left farming and my winter teaching job and I went full-time photography in 2018. And I'm sitting here in a position of privilege. I own my home. I don't have any medical or student debt. I have a really supportive partner who cooks for me when I'm busy. I'm white, I'm cis passing, and for all these reasons and many more, I'm able to work as a full-time photographer in the community. Super, super grateful. And before I go on about professional photography, I just want to say I'm not saying you need professional photography. The work that I've done for Goranson Farm since like 2015 for their social media and website, I just wanted to point out how many of these here are phone photos. You can have great photos just from your phone. Kate's gonna get into that a lot more. Professional photos are nice to have, but there's nothing wrong with using phone photos, and I still prefer to mix them up when I'm managing stuff for them. So if you're thinking about hiring a photographer or you've considered it, there's a lot of reasons. The main reason that farmers hire me is also the same reason a lot of families hire photographers. It's that you need photos of yourself because your buyers need photos of you to show who you are. You need photos of yourself for your website and social media. It's really hard to take photos of yourself that work for that kind of thing. You might need product photos, and that is really difficult to do with a phone. It can be done, but it is something that requires a pretty high level of skill, technical skill. Some people hire me every year because they want to just have a bank of photos to draw from over the year. So even if I'm there just for a day, I can provide them with 50 or 100 great photos, and then they can draw from them when they're struggling to come up with something to post or to revamp their website. You might need new photos to revamp your website too. If you get a grant, photography is a great thing to spend some of it on, and you can write that off. Or you might just really want photos for personal reasons, and as a farm, if you own your farm, you can write that off as a business expense. And then I want to talk about what to look for in a photographer. The number one way to find a photographer is like finding any other service provider, is just word of mouth. You know, ask around at the market, on your forums, see other people's photos you like, ask them who took them, ask to be put in touch. And then the types of photographers you want to look for somebody who's got experience, who's got a well-rounded portfolio, not just maybe 3 or 4 different shoots on their website. Somebody who's a part of your community, because accountability is important. You want to be able to trust who you're hiring and spending hundreds of dollars with. And you want somebody who's a professional, both for liability reasons and because you want your money to count. You don't want to spend money and then have it turn out to be something that is maybe not the quality you were hoping for. That's hard to determine. I'll get into that a little bit more as we go. The main thing is to know what your needs are when you're hiring a photographer, and being able to communicate that. So if you know you really need product photos or pictures of yourself, approach the and say, hey, I need photos of myself. Because sometimes if you hire a photographer, they're gonna spend an hour taking really awesome pictures of, like, you know, garlic bulbs drying in your barn, but you might not need that photo. So make sure you're communicating what you need. Pricing I'm gonna get into too. That's the thing everyone always wants to know the most about. And then I also wanted to warn you about color and editing style. It's just something I notice a lot, and I want you to make sure, again, that you're making a good investment and getting photos you'll be able to use for a long time, rather than something that just looks trendy for right now. When you're hiring a photographer, you'll see these words on their website probably. They might be asking you questions with these words. I've got these 3 brown check marks next to editorial, documentary, and photojournalistic. This all describes a style of photos. For the most part, they mean pretty much the same thing. They should mean that it's a realistic style that's gonna show things in natural light. It's gonna show things how they're really happening. And most importantly, they tell a story with the photos, which, if you're hiring photos for your business, that's probably what you need. And then if you just need pictures of yourself, you might say, like, hey, I just need to hire you for a portrait session or family photos. That'll often be a shorter session. It'll also often be less expensive. Just make sure, well, yeah, I'll get into licensing in a minute too. And then there's also art photography, product photography, commercial photography. Any photo you're using for a business is commercial photography. So if you're hiring somebody, you have to make sure you have a commercial license for whatever photos they're giving you. Even if you're just posting them on your Instagram, if it's to promote a business, that is a commercial use. Art photography, you probably don't want to hire an art photographer, although this photo here is probably what I would consider more of an art photo, but it can still be used for business purposes. And then the last 2 terms here, freelance, just means that the photographer is an independent subcontractor. So they're working for themselves. If they're freelancing, they're not an employee of another company. And then full-time is photographer code for, this isn't just a hobby and it's really hard to piece it all together, but I'm doing it and I'm proud that I have enough work coming in that I can support myself on it. It doesn't necessarily mean that a full-time photographer is better than a part-time photographer. There are plenty of people who do photography part-time who are total professionals and amazing. But you'll see a lot of photographers write, I'm a full-time photographer, and that is just kind of a point of pride because it's not an easy point to get to, especially here in Maine. Here's a couple different types of product photography. You might, if you are asking for product photography, a lot of times people, the assumption is just a product on a white background usually. And then on the right, here's the same products in like a styled shoot. The product on a white background, it does require special equipment and skill, but it's a lot less work than a styled shoot. So you'll want to consider what kind of product photography you might be asking for a quote for or hiring for. Yeah, the styled shoots or like a food shoot are always going to be a lot more expensive because it's so much more work to get it to look right and consistent. And here's some green lights and red flags when you're looking for a photographer. And the green lights, a diverse portfolio in terms of subject matter and types of photos. And what I mean by types of photos are what I have down below here. These are all photos of the exact same thing. This is Erica picking cherry tomatoes, but they're all really different photos. I know that she uses photos for social media, website, and email and print promotions. So I wanted to give her as diverse a selection as possible. You know, there are a couple photos here that have the subject sort of off to the side with more blank space on the side. For if you want to put words over a photo, for example. I always want to make sure there's one that shows your face, smiling, hopefully. One of them is kind of a product photo down in the middle there of the cherry tomatoes, and then just some different angles of action shots. So that's what I mean by look at their portfolio and look for different types of photos. If every photo is just a great sort of posed smiling portrait, that's what you're going to get. And that might be what you need. But if you see a wide diversity of kinds of shots, you're going to have a lot more to work with. Not super cheap. If someone is super affordable or cheap, it can be a pretty big red flag. They might not be running a legitimate business. They might be really new and don't understand the costs of doing business. They might just be independently wealthy and undercutting the market for whatever reason. Yeah, they probably don't know what they're doing if their prices are really low. Your photographer should have a lot of questions for you about what you need. They should provide you with a custom quote and a contract before your picture day, and you should discuss licensing ahead of time. And then under red flags, low pricing, I just mentioned. If they don't have any recognizable clients on their website, it might be somebody who's a good amateur photographer kind of getting started, or maybe you want to recognize businesses that they've done work for before. Everybody makes a lot of mistakes when they're first starting out, and you don't want to pay for someone to make their mistakes on you. If there aren't a lot of people in their portfolio, that's another sign that they're just kind of doing it on their own and aren't really at a professional level yet. Heavily filtered. I'll show you some examples of that later on, but that's also a sign of inexperience, and also those photos aren't going to be as useful to you. If they volunteer discounts or free work up front without you even asking or trying to negotiate, that can be a red flag, kind of a sign of desperation or something not being quite right. If they don't give you a quote or a contract, they're not running a business, and you could end up with some liability issues. And if they have really old work on display from like 10 years ago, that could be a sign that they're not updating their portfolio for some reason, or they haven't worked in a long time, or they're not really focusing on photography work at this point. And then pricing. Pricing for any photo job is always going to vary. If someone has flat rates, like by the day, it might be just a ballpark, but you should always be getting a custom quote after you answer a bunch of questions about where you are, when the photos are going to be taken, what kind of photos you want, how you're going to use them, what kind of license you need. Once the photographer understands what kind of equipment they're going to need. Like if you really want birth photos of your lambs in the barn in March, that's a totally different scenario than product photos of your farm stand at a market. So the photographer can't tell you how much it's going to cost you until they understand the job. But just to give you a range I have here, I'd expect to pay anywhere from $500 to $2,500 for one session. It totally depends on your needs. It depends on the photographer, and it depends on the licensing. So yeah, it's a lower rate than in most other areas in our region in New England. Maine hasn't really caught up with the cost of living the way other cities have. So yeah, that's what it is. And then there's lots of ways to get creative and pay for it too, as you know, I'm sure. You could budget it in, you know, just look at how much you paid in taxes last year and decide not to have that money left over at the end of the year and decide to turn it into a business expense and pay for it yourself. You could get a grant. I've worked with farmers who get a Mafka TA grant that can be counted towards photography. Value-added producer grant is a great one for product and marketing photography. Women-owned business grants, there's all kinds of grants. If you're writing a grant specifically to get funding for a photographer, you can totally approach the photographer ahead of time and say, hey, could you write me a quote? I want to maybe get this grant and do photos next year. And the photographer will be happy to do it. It should be free. The photographer would also be happy to write you a letter of support that might help you with the grant too. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask about that stuff. Maybe your photographer has a chest freezer and likes to eat, and you raise pigs. That might be a really good way to pay for your photography too, if your photographer is open to trading. When I trade, it's always a retail price for retail price. You know, you might give somebody a break if you know them coming from either direction, but when I'm trading, I do retail for retail. The only issue is it's whoever gets to me first with whatever product I don't have in my freezer. You know, you can only fit so much stuff in there. And then finally, another way you could fund your farm photography is get together with a farmer group, whether it's your market vendors or producers for a co-op, or like Wild Blueberry Association or Maine Maple Producers, and say, hey, let's get a group of farmers who all want to chip in for photography. Let's approach a photographer and say, if we hire you for X amount of shoots, what kind of pricing can you give us? It'll be lower, and your association or group might even have some funding to help offset that cost too. So that's another great way to do it. Everybody likes work. Yeah. And then this was the other big thing that I wanted to communicate today, was just about copyright and licensing. It's not something that's general knowledge, but in the times of the internet, it's something that I really wish more people were aware of. So whoever creates a photo, whether it's a professional or not, is technically the owner, the copyright owner of that photo. Only the copyright owner can license that photo for anyone else to use for a commercial purpose. So if you have an employee at your farm, or you are an employee at your farm, and you take a great photo, and then a local magazine approaches your farm and says, hey, we want to run that photo on the cover, only the person who took that photo can license that photo for use. That also means if your local co-op hires a photographer to come take photos of you at your farm for their promotional use, you can't use those photos on your website or on your social media or whatever, or send them to a different wholesale buyer, even though they're of you, unless you get a license or permission from that photographer to use them for that purpose. That's the way it's set up legally, and that's the way it works. And then, yeah, so commercial licensing means any kind of business use, anything you're using a photo to promote your business for. So even just posting something on Instagram, you technically and legally need to have a license, permission from whoever created that photo to post it for your own promotional purposes. When you hire a photographer, they're probably going to give you a contract that grants you a non-transferable license. If you really want to be able to send your photo around to other people who buy from you, you're going to need to ask for transferable terms. Most photographers will just say, oh, they'll be able to use it, they just need to contact me first, and I'll say yes. But there are always some fishy exceptions, so they're not going to grant you a transferable license. I wouldn't do it because sort of like that magazine scenario or something, where say you're a small farm and you sell to Whole Foods. Why should Whole Foods be able to use my work for free? They clearly have a budget for marketing and promotion. I'm not going to let them license my work for free because I need to make a living too. And then also in your contract, you'll probably have a non-exclusive license for your use. And what that means is the photographer could potentially license the photos they take at your farm to other organizations. They might try to pitch it for a magazine story, or they might license it to, the State Department of Ag if they're trying to run an ad promoting markets or something. That's something that I've done. If you don't want your photographer to be able to license your photos to anyone else, you need to ask for an exclusive license, meaning they can't license the images of you to another organization. I was at a farm this summer, and there was a perfect example of this where the owner of the farm got a text message one day with a photo of a billboard in upstate New York advertising, I think it was a health insurance company out there. And it was a photo of him from like 10 years ago, standing in a field that some photographer he couldn't even remember had taken for another reason, probably for a store or something. And his friend sent him a photo of him like, is this you? And that's perfectly legal to do. I don't think it's super ethical, but yeah, that can happen. So if you don't want that to happen, have a talk with your photographer first. And that brings me to model releases. That photographer had gotten model releases, which is what you legally need to do to be able to show someone's image and license it for any money. You know, like if you're a press photographer, you don't necessarily need a model release to publish a photo of someone. But if you're a commercial photographer making your living freelancing, you need to have model releases in order to make money off of anyone else's face, basically. So if your photographer is a professional, they might show up with model releases, and you can refuse to sign them if you want. You might have to pay more money if they can't have the option of relicensing them, but it's totally up to you. If it's somebody you trust, you can sign it and say, please get in touch with me before you license an image of my employee to some other organization. I think anyone worth their salt would get in touch with someone before licensing their image, but legally they don't have to. So if there's one thing you remember about working with a professional photographer from this whole talk, please remember this one slide. This is a list. I won't read through it, but this is a list of the process. People, usually one of the first questions somebody asks me is like, so how does this work? Like, what do we do next? But this is how it should go. There's a lot of steps, but that's how it should go. And your photographer should run all these steps for you. You shouldn't have to be asking for this stuff. And then again, these are all questions that should already be answered, but if you happen to be thinking about hiring a photographer, you might want to look at this. These are all just kind of things to protect you. Again, with the licensing, you want to make sure you have commercial licensing if it's not included. You want to make sure that the photographer is legally within bounds. They need to be insured if they're coming onto your commercial property, especially with expensive equipment. You have to have business insurance to work as a photographer, and a lot of people don't, and it's very risky to work with somebody, especially on a working farm, who does not have business insurance. It also protects you from other liability issues. For example, if they're licensing stuff to people they shouldn't be. And then if you want to do drone photography, if you're using it for any commercial purpose, you also need to have a pilot's license for that too. So you can fly a drone, I think if it's under like 5 pounds or something, and take photos all you want without a pilot's license, but the minute you do it for any kind of commercial purpose, even if it's promoting your own business, you need to have a pilot's license to be legally in bounds. Okay, and then I'm going to spend a little more time on this because it seems like this might be the only relevant part of my part of the talk for this crowd. But yeah, managing your photos. So if you have photos from a professional photographer, you should receive 2 different file sizes. You should receive a high res or full resolution version, and that's what you want to use for anything you're printing, and for if you want to put it in a video or something about your farm. Other than that, low resolution is good for everything else. Anything online, even some print jobs is fine. Low resolution is fine. The difference is the file sizes. So the high resolution files are obviously going to be a lot bigger than the low ones. Going to take up more room on your drives. They also take longer to load if you're using them on a website. So especially if you live in a rural area like me that doesn't have fast internet, you'll notice some web pages, the images never load because the file sizes are just too big. So if you're working on your own website, you want to make sure you're uploading small files. I recommend keeping them under 1 megabyte. And if you're having issues formatting that, just ask your photographer. They're the expert. You can specifically say, hey, could you also export them at a web resolution size for me? And they should be happy to do it. You don't need to worry about doing that for any kind of social media apps or platforms, Facebook, anything like that will automatically convert your files and compress them to a smaller size so that the platform will run well. So I've had people ask me like, what file size or type should I use for Instagram? What's the best way? It doesn't matter. Instagram's going to compress it for you, so don't worry about it. And then as you're using the files, you're probably going to get them in a JPEG format, which is great. It's a nice small size. It's been around forever. It's compatible with everything. The only issue with them is every time you move them, the quality of the file degrades. So nowadays, photo files are so large and so detailed, it won't really matter. But especially if you're working with maybe older photos, or if you're going to be using these photos for 10 years or so, you always want to pull from the earliest version of the file, like the version of the file you got from the photographer, right? So instead of one that if you've taken it out of that thumb drive and then put it into a folder and then moved it into another folder and then uploaded it in email and then downloaded it, and then every time you move it, the quality degrades. It's just something to be aware of, and it is exponential. So the more you do it, the faster it gets worse. And that's not a huge issue to worry about, but something I see a lot of people doing, a lot of, and you've probably noticed it on Instagram or Facebook maybe too, when you see photos that you start to be able to kind of like see the pixels, or they get blurry, or they just don't look quite right, or maybe kind of looks like it hasn't loaded all the way. That's because the user has been screenshotting it instead of actually saving the file and emailing it to where they need it. So I'm going to show you an example of what happens right before this talk. On the left is the original file that I exported from my photo editing software. And then on the right, this is the same file after I screenshotted it only 5 times. So I hope my internet is fast enough so that you can see the difference. You can even see that the color has changed a little bit. It's turned a little more purpley, and I think that's because of the way my screen reads itself when I'm taking a screenshot. And you can see that his shirt looks pixelated, his face is blurry. So don't do that if you can avoid it. It works if you're desperate to get something to make a post and you can't take the time to upload and download, but don't do that as a best practice. And then for organizing the photos, I'm gonna take you on a tour of the chaos of my hard drive. When you receive photos, or you're compiling all your photos from a season, or your employees are sending you photos, or you're organizing someone else's photos, I think the best way to do it is on an external hard drive. This is one that I use. It's a company called Lacy. I don't really know how to say it. This one I think is 4 terabytes, which is an insane amount of space for normal file sizes. And it costs like 150 bucks. I have 6 of them. My oldest one is from like 2016, I think, and it still works. So I highly recommend that. You can also use cloud storage. I don't do any of that because, again, my internet's slow and I don't trust it. I back everything up on physical drives. You can also make backups just on thumb drives. Just put one out in the shop or out in the barn just in case. Put it in a place where you're not going to move it for a long time, so you know where it is if you can't find the other copy of it. So I'm gonna get out of this presentation, I think, and I'm gonna show you my file system just as an example. So this is kind of a do as I say, not as I do situation. I meant to clean it up and show you like how I would do it if I was starting fresh, but I'm gonna just show you how it is now. So this is my hard drive here, my external hard drive. And this is one I've been using since June 2020. So it's a little chaotic, but it has a lot of older backups. This is all different projects that I've got that go back maybe like 8 years. But what I started finally doing is keeping all of my farm work in a folder called Farms right here.
Hey, Kelsey.
Yeah.
Someone's asking if you could repeat the brand name of the external hard drive you work with.
It's Lacie, Lacie. And they're pretty rugged. I'm pretty rough on equipment. I drop them all the time. I've never had an issue with them. You just don't want to get them, you don't want them to get too hot. Don't leave them in. So yeah, this is kind of my master farms folder. So I know if I'm looking for a farm photo, it's somewhere in here. And then for farms that I've done more than, or groups that I've done more than one shoot for, like you might be organizing for your farm, I'm going to show you the Goranson farm folder, which looks insane, but it's actually, this is where you can see I started doing a good job organizing. I finally just started dating things. I used to do things like, oh, carrot and beet harvest, or this is what we'll use for the Christmas card. But when it piles up over 7 years, it doesn't really work anymore because it's like, which year? I'm looking for a photo of Shira. Which year did she start working there? I want that photo of her picking beets, but yeah. So I finally started just dating everything. And I know if I'm looking for a picture of strawberries, I'm looking in one of the June folders, right? Because I mean, so far the seasons have been sort of consistent. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 5 years? But at least if you're looking for a photo maybe to post today that looks like it could be from recently or shows a crop or something that you're doing or harvesting right now, you know what time of year it's supposed to be from. So I just do it by date. Some people, well, past me, I started labeling things like here, horses, for any work with the horses, but it just got too chaotic. That system did not work for me. You might find a better way to do it. If you do, let me know. Another thing you could do if you're doing something, like it sounds like at Broad Turn, you're probably going to be trying to show different varieties or maybe different crops. So another thing you can do is use a photo editing software. I use Lightroom. It's not free. I think I pay like $8 a month to use it. I love it because it's a pretty efficient way to edit. You don't need something this advanced even. There's open source photo editing software too. Another really good one is called Photo Mechanic. That's great for organizing and culling photos. But in Lightroom, you can actually go in, you can give things tags too. For me, I think that would add about 5 hours of work to my week, and I'm definitely not ever gonna start doing it. But if you were dealing with a finite number of photos per year, and they were all something that you really needed to organize, you could put it in a program like this and tag, okay, there's all of my ageratum, there's all of my mountain mint. And when you needed a photo of that, you could just type into your search bar mountain mint and you would get however many photos you had tagged. So that's one other idea. And again, if other people here have ways of doing it or methods, I know I'd love to hear them. I bet other people would too. But yeah, I'll go back to this for just a sec. I just have a few more slides.
Yeah, Kelsey, I just messaged you. We should transition in the next like 7 minutes, but you're doing great. And someone just asked a question in the chat specifically about Lightroom and if you were using it to tag or label images. So right while you were answering that question.
Yeah, I don't. I could do better at that. You can tag things when you import them, but I don't. Yeah. Yeah, and then the only other note is if you're getting photos that are taken by someone else that you need to keep track of who to give credit to or who to make sure you have a license from, you might want to put a doc in the folder with the photos that has at least their name on it. So you know how to get in touch with them 7 years from now and you can't remember who took that one photo that you keep using. So yeah, and then this is something that I mentioned earlier. I just wanted to show some examples and then that's the end. But as a professional photographer, I want my clients to be able to use their photos as much as possible for as long as possible, because it is an investment, right? To hire somebody. And also, like, it's so much work to produce photos. Why would I want them to be useful for a couple of months and then have them go out of style or not be useful? So I wanted to show you some photos. They're all my photos. I'm not trying to make fun of anybody, but I do see a lot of photographers kind of putting filters on photos that are trendy. And you'll see it a lot with like wedding and portrait photography. Some people use it beautifully and some people use it a little heavily. Either way, they go out of style. And I don't want that to happen with my photos. I want them to be used. So I'm going to show you, I just put on some of the built-in presets that my Lightroom comes with that are supposedly like trendy right now. So on the left, this is like the artsy filter, which might look cool on some portraits. It's supposed to mimic film. But if you're a flower farmer trying to sell asters to your florist, they need to know what color the asters are. And the photo on the left does not give them accurate information about that. This photo is pretty eye-catching at first, but this is what I call kind of like the muddy filter. If you look at the carrots, they're not quite the right color of orange. They're really high contrast. There's not a lot of detail in his face because his skin is dark and the filter is darkening it even more, even though he's the subject. You'll notice also the trees in the background are really oversaturated. And the shadows in this are tinted orange. Here's how I would edit it. This is natural light. And this might catch your eye more, and you might like how this looks. This is a really popular style right now. But as you'll see, it's gonna go out of style and it's not gonna work for you for a long time. This is one that was really popular maybe like 5 years ago, the desaturated blue greens. I saw some people using that for, well, I saw it a lot for weddings, but I saw some people using it for like editorial farm photography in magazines, and I just couldn't understand why you'd want to make flowers or vegetables the wrong color. It really drove me nuts. Just as someone who pays attention to it a lot, maybe I'm neurotic, I don't know, but yeah, this one's going out of style already. And then here's another kind of like matte muddy one. Looks kind of cool, like old film or something. But if you see like a natural edit of it, you'll see that you're completely losing all the detail in the horse's coats and the dog's face. Yeah. And then we're getting into some really older ones. This was a popular one or in like the 2010s, sort of a grungy style. It's okay for a portrait, I guess, but if your beet greens look like that, you're gonna have some problems selling them, I think. And then this one, if you've ever seen wedding photos from the early 2000s, you probably have seen some beautiful sepia portraits. Nothing wrong with it, no judgment, but it's really out of date now and it looks like it. So natural color all the way. And then this is probably the worst crime against color editing ever. This was super popular right at the beginning of digital photography. It's called Selective Color. I think it looks super cheesy and weird now. It didn't at the time, but for as weird as this photo on the left might look, all the other photos that are being heavily filtered now, like that orangey one, that's what they're gonna look like in 10 years. So if you put them all together, if you're collecting photos over a long period of time and your website looks like this, it's not gonna work as well for you as if it looks like that. So when you're selecting a photographer or talking to your photographer, I would recommend that you emphasize you want natural color. You don't want the color to be altered. You want things to look how they are, especially if you're selling crops, that it matters what color they are. So that's my presentation. I hope it's useful. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Kelsey. You've given me some like serious inspo to do some organization of my life. Before we take a little bit of a break, I would love to open it up for any questions that are coming through for Kelsey at this point. Kate mentions, yeah, it's true for Instagram about the filters. Don't use the filters. Sometimes what I do, like on my Instagram account, is I'll like edit it with like the edit bars a little bit, but nothing for filters.
I totally do that too. I'm not saying don't edit your photos. Go for it. Just like be aware and watch your color. Just don't mess with the color too much. Do whatever you want, but don't make the greens blue, please.
Yeah, Angela. Angela, do you have a question?
Oh, I do actually. I'm curious about just making sure that we're properly crediting our photographers on our website. For example, the photographer's name might not be exactly with the image, if there's a carousel or a variety of images on a web page, but at the bottom, we will list who the photographers are and also include a link to their website so that, you know, clients, viewers can look further. Is that reasonable, that it's just like on the page somewhere?
I think that's a really nice. I consider it a courtesy. If someone has hired me and paid me for my work, I consider it a courtesy if I'm getting credit. It doesn't make any sense not to credit people, because any text or link information, whether it's on social media or a website, is only going to increase traffic through the page. So that's always a good practice, just sort of technically speaking, but I'm not going to be mad if someone hired me and then I don't see my name on every single photo. If I took photos for someone else, or if for some reason they have a photo of mine that they didn't hire me for, I expect to at least have some credit on there. But yeah, I don't think there's, especially if you're doing your own web design, there's not a lot of great ways to put the name on the photo. You could ask them for a watermarked version, but I think it's nice that you're trying, and I think that's more than is required.
Thanks. Yeah, your work is beautiful, and it's fun to hear your story about like kind of how you got into farming and into farming and photography, and like where the journey took you. So thanks.
Thanks for that question, Angela. Is there one more before we transition to a break? Okay. I also want to give a selfish plug for Kelsey. I also worked with Kelsey for photos for my farm, and I don't love getting my picture taken, but it was a very positive experience. And now I am able to use that to help build the brand of my farm. So it's super helpful. I did add the link to the Mafka technical assistance grant. That is how we see a lot of farmers pay for things that enhance their brand, including paying for professional photographers so you can have amazing pictures to work with when it comes back to the busy season. I know for myself as a farmer, it's very hard for me to remember, oh, I got to slow down and take some more pictures because I have to share this with CSA members or whatever, but having a really great slew of pictures there is going to be helpful next year. So the link is in the chat, and I'll drop it in again for that Mafka technical assistance grant, which can help pay for photographers if you are farming in Maine.
I wanted to talk to people kind of about easy ways to improve your farm photography. For a small bit, I owned a photography school called the Define School, and being a farmer and someone that has a minor obsession with photography, I thought this would be a good kind of place where I can share and work with other farmers. So I don't know how to turn, there you go. See if I can figure out how to make it turn a page. There we go. So building a catalog of images, we just talked with Kelsey about getting pro photos done. There's lots of other ways that you can build up your catalog so that you have photos that are usable for your website, for Instagram, and for other social medias. As far as websites are concerned, I primarily would recommend getting professional photography. If it's not in your budget right now, you obviously can use iPhone photos, but professional photos definitely, if you have them, belong on a website. That's your premier platform where you have complete control of your farm, your farm's message, and you want to present yourself as well as possible. As far as the rest of it, well, social media is concerned and the image-centric world in which we now live and operate, the phone in your pocket is a great asset. You also have friends that come and visit your farm and they take pictures because their kids are there or they're seeing your animals or hanging out by a bonfire. If your friends are there and their phones are out, have them send you photos. It just adds to your catalog. And then if you don't want to just have your phone out all the time, or if you're like me and sometimes you want to check out and leave your phone back at the house while you're doing your farm chores, you can add it to your chores. So like one day of the week, you make sure you have your phone in your pocket and you're taking some images of your daily activities. There's time that you spend watching your animals for health, or times that you are going through and harvesting vegetables and you want to stretch. That's a good time to take your phone out and instead of go on Facebook, maybe grab some quick images that are added to your collection. And then another way that you can add to your photo catalog is stock photography. You can buy stock photos. That is dangerous when you're selling a product. Not all pears, for instance, are created equal. You can see mine look a little funky from our farm here. If you're sending a picture of a perfect item that is from stock photography and your client is buying it based on that photo, it doesn't look exactly right. You are going to lose that customer because it's basically false advertising. So stock photography can come in handy for certain situations, like if you're trying to sell something that hasn't come up yet, but I definitely want everyone to exercise caution when using it and not use it regularly. It is available. It's good for filler while you're waiting for other photos on website stuff, even if it's just like a tree or some kind of wildlife nature from your farm, things like that. So those are kind of my 5 major sources I have of photos that I keep in like a catalog. I keep some stuff on my computer, like the pro photos and like my favorite iPhone photos. I keep a lot of them just on my phone at the ready in case I want to do a post. Let's see if I can, maybe the page will change. Sorry guys, technical.
Maybe try clicking your screen, Kate.
There you go.
Right.
And there we go, taking better photos with your iPhone. So this is kind of, and I meant to ask if people, I don't know if I can see the chat when I'm screen sharing, but it's good for talking points later. If you are taking photos with your phone, if you could share kind of whether you have an Android or an iPhone. I tend to just fall back on iPhones because I'm a Mac person and it's easy for me, but it is nice to know if there's, like if I'm talking all about different things you can do on your iPhone to improve your photos, if most of you are Android users, it's not really that helpful. Androids have specific apps you can download. So that being said, when you're using your iPhone or your Android phone, you can choose to shoot directly with your phone, or with Androids, they have additional apps you can use for your phone. With Android, I definitely recommend downloading an app to take better pictures. It's alive. Here, you want to see the whole, I did it wrong. Oh. No, I'm not a good presenter.
Can you use your
There you go, got it.
Okay.
There we go. So photography is capturing light. It is like the essence of light in an image, and what you're looking at is shadows and light spots when you're looking at an image. So I like to tell people always, you can be a professional photographer, or you can be someone with a phone. And if you have bad light and you're not using it correctly, you're going to take bad photos. It doesn't matter how expensive your gear is. It doesn't matter how much experience you have. Light is what's making your photo. It's what makes it interesting. It's what you're looking at. So learning the basics of light can help you in so many ways, just improve your photography enough so people love to look at it. So the first thing I want to talk about is there's types and quality of light. I actually pulled off one of my old classes and printed it out so I could use the notes to make sure I didn't miss anything, because I haven't gone through it in such a long time. But the best way to really get to know light is to walk around your house at different times of the days and go to your windows, because you'll notice that if you're standing in front of your window, or even like you'll notice if you're in front of your computer screen, the light on your face from your computer screen will look a certain way, or the light from the window will look a certain way. It's why I always tell my mom to face a window when she's FaceTiming with me, because you're gonna look better, the subject looks better, the picture looks better, if light is towards the image. So going around your house and seeing windows, seeing when in your house you have like a nice light glow versus when you have like a hard line shadow, that has to do with both time of day and what the weather's like outside. And so making these observations and seeing, taking pictures of something really simple that you have in your house, whether it's like, if you have like a cat that will actually sit where you want to practice with, you can kind of start to like just take pictures at the same place, different times of day, and see what looks better to you, and kind of look at the photo and get a feel for that. The other thing, sorry, and so, so when you're looking at a window and you see the line that goes across the floor, that's going to be like hard light. That's the type that, depending on where you're standing, is going to put shadows on your face. If you're taking pictures of a flower, you're going to see like shadows from the petals on the flower itself. You'll see like distinctive lines of light and dark. And hard light, I consider one of the hardest things to photograph. When you see shadows, dark lines between light and dark, you have to be really experienced with light, and it's hard to photograph. That's why when you're starting out, taking photos early in the morning or late in the night are going to be a lot easier for you before, but taking photos in the middle of the day on a bright day, you're going to have lots of hard shadows to contend with, and it can be harder to take a good image. So then if you have soft light, and that's going to be on a cloudy day or at the end of the day, you know, you've probably heard of like the golden hour right before sunset. And that time of day, the sun's very low in the sky, everything's kind of glowing, and that's a really easy time to take good photos. So the quality of light can so far be hard or soft. You can also have light that is speckled. If you've looked at light through a tree and there's blotches, where it's coming down, it's filtered light, speckled light, and it'll look like kind of like a mosaic of light and dark spaces. And all of these are going to take different photos. But I'll have the message if I'm going too into detail on some of this.
I would say, yeah, just for the sake of time, allowing more time for questions might be better.
Yeah, no, I'm already like, should I go through my whole class? Okay, so when you go through these different types of light, one thing that you need to consider is the exposure of your phone. So if you have an iPhone, you can tap different parts of the picture of your phone. So if someone's standing towards you in shadows, you can actually adjust your exposure like you would in a full-size camera. It's not exact science, and for those of us who have done it for a long time, you'll tap your phone and then you'll notice that if you don't take the picture right away, it'll go back. Certain iPhones and Android phones, when you tap your phone on a place of the exposure you want, it'll actually give you a slide bar where you can make it lighter and darker. Your best bet always in photography is to take a picture. Your picture you're actually taking is to be as close to real life as possible. Your goal isn't to have to edit it afterwards. So if you can adjust your exposure on your phone and play with that little like touch on different spots of your phone and lighten and darken it, that's going to improve your quality of photos. And then other things to consider in the light is if you're taking a produce picture and you want it to be really like true to the color of the produce you're taking, a kind of cheat is if you bring it just inside a door so that you're in a shadowed area. This is called open light. So you can put your product, your flower, your vegetable into this, like where it's still really bright, but you've just walked into the garage or just barely walked into the door. That is going to go ahead and make the quality of the photo better of what you're taking than if you were taking it in the harsh light. It's like kind of creating a space where you have really good light for your photo, even if in outside you just don't have a great quality light. So that's one of the things to consider, is like you can move your product into somewhere where there's a better spot to take a photo. You don't have to just take it out in the field where you are. Take a pile of dirty carrots and bring them in and put them on a nice wooden chair just inside of your garage, and you can get a great photo. So if it's something you can move, consider moving it into a place that you're better light. A fun cheat you can do when you're just starting out is you're out in the field and you want a great picture of something. Take 6 at least pictures of the same thing at the same time, but slowly walk around it. Whether it is a vegetable, a flower, an animal in the field, take several angles walking around it, because then you maybe don't know out in the field what light is going to be better, but you'll be able to look at those options instead of just snapping the one photo. I got the photo of my cow, that looks great, whatever. If you want to improve the quality of your photos, taking multiple photos from multiple angles to get different light will help. That's the same with, a lot of people don't realize how much you see photographers crouch down. The reason they do that is because photos look best when they're on the same plane as the image you're taking. So if you're taking a picture of your flowers, yes, there's a lot of straight above photos to be taken, but actually getting down on your knees and being on the same level on the ground as the flower, as the plant, as the animal is a way to also improve the photos that you're getting and improve the quality of light. Okay. Speeding it up. So another thing to consider beyond light, I did a couple of like kind of quick notes, is variation in frame. So you can see 2 photos have very different qualities. You can take photos, try to play around with getting things around the edge of your photo and just taking things around the bottom edge or the top edge to take a more interesting photo. I tend to like do this too much because I like to create variety. That I create almost too much, and I'll have like, for the beer shed, a beer can on one side one day, half in the other day, and it starts to look messy. But a little bit of variety keeps it interesting and will keep people more engaged. The rule of thirds is an old photography rule that is basically like sky, subject, ground, rule of thirds, or like a picture is more appealing to the eye if it's cut into an even thirds, like not necessarily in half. So you would want to put the horizon line in either the bottom third or the top third on the line and not put it right across the center. And the way you can adjust that is actually by crouching or standing taller while you're taking the picture. So that's something you can do that's really easy, that can kind of improve your photos. Along with the rule of thirds, getting your subject, if it's a cow or an animal or another person, above the horizon line can make it really clear that they're the subject of the photo, and that's something that's great to do. When you're taking photos with your phone, It's awesome to have close-ups. You want to have close-ups. You want to have a variety of photos from really far away and really close up. Don't use the zoom on your phone. It sucks and it's not your friend. If you want a picture of your cow's nose and all the whiskers, get in with your cow and get as close as possible. Don't use the zoom on your camera ever, because it's a digital zoom, so you're actually not getting any more information. You're just basically degrading the quality of your photo. The same thing on the phone. You can actually tap focal points. I know a lot of people have probably already done this, but if you didn't know, and there's a couple different things back in your photo in the depth of field, you can pick what you want to focus on just by using your photo and tapping. And then when you take your photos, either take selfies or hand your photos off to your friends. I'm going to talk about this a tiny bit in like when you're actually sharing images on social media, but as much as Kelsey mentioned it too, people want to see you. Do an experiment. If you haven't put a picture of yourself on social media, just throw a picture of yourself on your farm, walking with a chicken in your hand, or doing anything that you do on your farm. If you take a picture of yourself, it's going to average twice as many likes. So if you're feeling like you're in the doldrums on your social media, include a picture of yourself and it'll kind of boost that experience up. If you get photos from someone like Kelsey, who's going to give you some great photos of yourself, make a plan to, like, once every week or once every month, share one of those photos that's from a professional photographer that has you in it. That way you're going to get all that reaction and that social media exposure, but you're also going to have those pictures of yourself that people want to see. They want to know their farmer, and we want them to know that their food came from us, not from, you know, a CAFO in Iowa. So you are part of what you're selling, and it's important to include that and take those selfies and experiment with your selfies. You want a really good picture? Take one in this light, and you're going to look stupid in your field, and it's going to feel totally awkward going in a circle, but do it, because you'll see the difference in the photos as you go in the circle and the quality of light and the photo that you end up with. All right. So sharing your farm on social media. I say keep it interesting. I might go a little insane with this, but you want a good variety of what you see on your farm every day. I feel like having a little bit of wildlife, having a little bit of yourself, having, like, people want the whole story of the farm. And that's really the way to include the whole experience, in making your customers and the people, the fellow farmers, be more involved in your experience. And people want to see you. And note to self, I tried to find a picture of myself farming, and there are only selfies on my phone. There's none on my computer. So Kelsey, you're gonna get a call from me, because that's my son. And then who is your audience? This is a common pitfall I see sharing on social media. Farms sometimes on certain social media accounts, whether it's just your Facebook, just your Instagram, I don't know who tweets on their farm, but some people probably do. I just use it for, like, politics and things, but who your audience is on specific social media will vary. It varies by age group. It also varies by your customer base, who's commenting, and whether it's fellow farmers. So I would say my Facebook following for my farm is mostly customers. It is mostly people who are in my community, who want to know when I have turkey available, who want to know what I'm selling, when I'm selling it. My Instagram is, I would say, 60-ish% other farmers. It's farmers that, you know, we've either, you know, used the same hashtags and you see a picture that you like. We've been in these types of Mafka events together, beginning farmers together. It's the social network that's actually connecting me with other farmers. So when you're spending your time posting photos with a, like, if I'm gonna sell a a pig, I'm going to post a good picture of that pig on Instagram. If I'm going to sell, you know, ground turkey, I'm putting it on Facebook. Sometimes that's an important thing to consider. Sometimes, you know, I personally get lazy and just share it to both because it'll auto-populate. But if you have a more intense divide than I do, that might be something that you want to consider. All right, and then kind of the last bit is I wanted to talk about is social responsibility, political messaging, and being yourself on these social platforms and when you're sharing your photography. So as far as social responsibility, something I want to bring up for discussion that I'd love to talk about if people want to talk about it, because I think it's something that's kind of on the forefront now that Facebook released all the information on how social media affects mental health, is if you're posting mostly to other farmers and you're only posting your best days, what kind of message that's sending out. If you're trying to market your farm, then you want to just send out your best days, and how you kind of meet in the middle and where we should all be with that, and how we can educate the public on the farming experience that also like includes kind of the check-ins that we need as fellow farmers. Political messaging is a personal choice. I've noticed more and more businesses are getting political. I think that's the nature of how intense it's been over the last 8 years. But that's something that you need to decide for yourself, whether you're going to include political messaging in your images. And I am more than game to talk about that and how people feel about that as well. And just don't forget to be authentic to yourself. There's a lot of farms out there. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of stuff on social media. If you can take images that are true to your lived experience on your farm, and you can share images that are what you love and what you're doing, you're going to get more of a response from those images. If you're taking images because you have to take images for social media, you're not going to get the same response. So find some joy in it, be yourself, and try to put something as authentic as possible out there on the social world. All right.